Beyond the gates, spoilers tease that Bill hears Martin's warning about Hayley and it lands heavy in his mind right away. No delay. No polite small talk before the storm, just that quiet, uneasy realization forming inside him that something about Hayley is wrong lately, something that doesn't sit well with the way she talks, or the way she suddenly rushes to change topics when certain things are mentioned. It all begins when Bill remembers the strange story Hayley told him about a man named Sammy, the supposed bodyguard she wanted to hire because she said she felt unsafe after the robbery. But even at the moment she said it, Bill already sensed a small crack in the story, something slightly off. And now, after hearing Martin's concern, those cracks begin to widen inside his thoughts, slowly turning from a vague doubt into a troubling suspicion that Hayley might not be telling him the truth at all, or worse, she might be trapped in something dangerous that she refuses to explain. Bill hates that thought, because protecting Hayley has always been instinct for him, yet now protection may require questioning her, and that alone feels wrong. Bill cannot stop thinking about the robbery Hayley went through. The fear she showed afterwards looked real enough at the time. Trembling hands, restless nights, the way she kept checking the door locks again and again as if someone might come back at any moment. But Martin's words begin echoing in his head, and he knows Martin is not the type to speak lightly about something like this. Martin has seen too many victims fall into deeper trouble after the first crime happened. He knows how criminals think, and how they keep control over people long after the theft itself is over. That is exactly what Martin tries to explain to Bill during their conversation. Not in a dramatic tone, but calm and serious, like someone who already knows how these stories usually end. He tells Bill that robberies rarely end the night they happen. Sometimes the thief returns in different ways: threats, pressure, intimidation, silence, forced onto the victim, so they do not report details or cooperate with police. Martin's eyes when he says this look tired, like he remembers something personal he wishes he could undo. Bill listens carefully, because he remembers too well the case Martin is referring to, the Kenny case, the robbery that turned into something much worse because of one wrong move. Martin had carried that guilt longer than anyone expected, and Bill himself helped Martin through parts of that investigation. Long nights reviewing evidence, arguments about whether they pushed too hard or not enough. In the end, mistakes were made that still linger in Martin's memory like a scar that refuses to fade. So when Martin says he understands the psychology of victims better than most people Bill knows, he means every word. This is not theory to him, it is experience. Painful experience that he refuses to watch happen again if he can prevent it. Martin explains slowly that victims sometimes lie, not because they want to deceive their loved ones, but because they are afraid of consequences they cannot control. Criminals often plant fear in them. A quiet threat whispered during the robbery, or a message sent later. Suddenly, the victim begins living inside a cage of silence where every word they say feels dangerous. Martin warns Bill to watch Hayley's behavior carefully, her words, her reactions, because subtle changes can reveal when someone is being pressured. A hesitation before answering, a story that shifts slightly when repeated, small details that do not match earlier explanations. Martin is not accusing Hayley of anything directly, but the concern in his voice is impossible to ignore. Bill nods during that conversation, yet inside his mind, the memory of Sammy returns again and again. The mysterious bodyguard, Hayley, insisted she needed. At the time, Bill thought it was simply fear talking. After a robbery, many people want extra protection for a while. It sounded reasonable on the surface, but now with Martin's warning, it starts to look different. Because Hayley never gave many details about Sammy, just vague comments about someone she found through a recommendation, nothing solid. Bill realizes he never actually saw any contact information or proof that Sammy even existed. The name appeared suddenly, then disappeared just as quickly from the conversation whenever Bill asked follow-up questions. What Bill does not know yet is that Sammy was never real. That entire story came from Hayley's desperate attempt to cover the presence of Randy in her life. Randy, who is connected to a situation far more complicated than Bill imagines. The lie seemed harmless at first when Hayley invented it, just a quick solution to avoid difficult explanations. But lies grow heavy fast when people begin asking questions. And now that lie becomes the crack that might expose everything, because Bill is starting to look closer than before. Martin continues speaking to Bill about the pattern he has seen many times. Criminals returning to manipulate victims even after the robbery, Maybe they demand money later, maybe silence, maybe cooperation and something else entirely. He says clearly that the first crime might only be the beginning. That is what worries him about Hayley's situation, because if she looks frightened and secretive, there could be more happening behind the scenes than anyone realizes. Bill feels a chill hearing that possibility, because he remembers the moment Hayley suggested leaving town with him, the sudden idea of escaping to St. Bart's for a while. She framed it like a romantic getaway, but the urgency behind it now looks suspicious in hindsight. Bill begins piecing together fragments of memory. The way Hayley insisted they should leave quickly, the way she avoided discussing the robbery in detail afterwards, the tension that flickered across her face when certain names were mentioned. Suddenly those moments feel less random and more like signals he failed to understand earlier. Maybe she is scared of something bigger than the robbery itself. Maybe someone is pressuring her quietly from the shadows. Bill feels both protective and unsettled. Because if that is true, then Hayley has been facing this threat alone. The irony is that Hayley is indeed under pressure, but not from the robbers Martin fears. Instead, the source of her fear is Lynette, who holds a different kind of leverage over her. Something personal and dangerous in another way. Yet, from the outside, the symptoms look the same. Anxiety, secrecy, sudden decisions. So Martin's theory accidentally aligns with Hayley's behavior even though the real cause is different. That coincidence may lead Bill down a path of investigation that uncovers far more than Hayley intended. Bill leaves his conversation with Martin carrying the weight of that warning. He cannot ignore it now, especially when Martin adds that if Hayley is being threatened, she might need more support than she realizes. Legal protection, police involvement, community resources, things that victims often avoid because fear keeps them silent. Martin says firmly that criminals rely on that silence, and the best defense is breaking it, speaking up before the intimidation grows stronger. He offers his help without hesitation if Bill believes Hayley might be caught in such a situation. Walking away from that conversation, Bill feels restless, his mind turning over every detail of the past few days, the fake bodyguard story, the sudden desire to leave for St. Bart's, the uneasy energy around Hayley whenever certain topics appear. He starts to wonder if her plan to leave town was actually an attempt to escape something rather than simply relax. Maybe she thinks distance will solve the problem, or at least buy time. But if criminals are involved, running away rarely works the way people hope. Later, when Bill sees Hayley again, he studies her more closely than before. Not in an obvious, suspicious way, but quietly observing the small things Martin told him to watch for. The rhythm of her speech, the pauses between sentences, the way her eyes shift when certain questions come up. He notices something subtle, yet unmistakable. Hayley seems constantly alert, like someone waiting for bad news to arrive at any moment. Her smile appears too quickly sometimes, as if she is trying to cover the tension underneath. And that only deepens Bill's worry. Bill brings up the idea of the bodyguard again during their conversation, casually at first, asking how things are going with Sammy and whether the arrangement has been finalized. Hayley hesitates for half a second before answering. It is small, but Bill catches it. Then she says something vague about Sammy being busy and that she might reconsider the plan anyway. That response only confuses Bill further, because earlier she insisted strongly that the bodyguard was necessary. Inside Hayley's mind, panic flickers the moment Sammy's name comes up again. She knows the lie is fragile, and every question makes it harder to maintain. She cannot tell Bill about Randy, because that would open another door she is not ready to face. And she definitely cannot explain Lynette's threats. So she continues improvising half-truths, hoping the conversation will move elsewhere, but Bill's attention does not drift this time. Bill recalls Martin's advice about repeated stories revealing inconsistencies. So he gently asks when Hayley first contacted Sammy and where the recommendation came from. Hayley's answers feel scattered, different from what she said before. Small variations that might not matter to someone less attentive. But now Bill is listening with new awareness. The realization slowly builds that something in her narrative is collapsing. Yet Bill still does not confront her directly, because the possibility that she is being threatened keeps echoing in his mind. If Martin is right, then pushing too hard could scare her further. Victims under pressure often hide deeper when they feel cornered. So Bill chooses patience instead. He watches and listens, waiting for clearer evidence before deciding what to do. Meanwhile, Martin continues thinking about the conversation as well. He cannot shake the sense that Hayley's case resembles patterns he has seen before. Part of him worries he might be projecting his past mistakes onto a new situation. But the instinct remains strong enough that he reaches out to Bill again later. He reminds him that help is available if Hayley needs it. Victims sometimes need someone else to open the door to support because fear keeps them frozen. Martin emphasizes that the law can protect people in these circumstances, that criminals who use intimidation eventually face consequences if evidence is gathered properly. He wants Bill to understand that silence only benefits the offenders, not the victims. His tone carries both caution and determination. Because he refuses to watch another person fall deeper into danger while everyone else stays uncertain, Bill appreciates that offer more than he says aloud, knowing Martin's experience comes from hard lessons. Although Bill still lacks clear proof something is wrong, he cannot dismiss the feeling growing inside him, the sense that Hayley's situation is far from simple. If she truly is under pressure from someone, then ignoring it would be the worst possible mistake. At the same time, Hayley feels the walls closing in without realizing Bill's suspicions are beginning to form. She believes the biggest threat is still Lynette and the secrets she holds. But the lie about Sammy is now creating a second danger, because Bill's curiosity keeps circling back to it. If he uncovers the truth about Randy, the consequences might spread in directions she never planned. Bill starts considering quiet ways to verify the bodyguard story without alarming Hayley, maybe checking contacts, maybe asking around discreetly to see if anyone knows a security professional named Sammy who recently worked with her. The more he thinks about it, the more determined he becomes to uncover the truth, not because he wants to expose Hayley, but because he wants to protect her if Martin's fears turn out to be real. Somewhere in the middle of all these tangled thoughts, Bill realizes the most important point Martin made. Criminals rely on isolation. They count on victims feeling alone and powerless. If Hayley is trapped in that kind of fear, then she needs someone standing beside her, whether she admits it or not. So Bill decides he will keep watching carefully, listening closely, waiting for the moment when the truth finally surfaces. Because one way or another, something hidden in Hayley's life is about to come into the light.